The pastries sat on my doorstep like a loaded gun. Beautiful, deadly, and deliberately placed. 3 perfect little eclairs nestled in a pink bakery box, tied with a cream-colored ribbon. The kind that would kill my daughter in minutes. I'm Ava, and this isn't the first time my sister-in-law has tried to prove I'm lying about Lily's egg allergy. But it's the first time she's been this bold about it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, watch Jessica. She's not done testing your daughter's allergy. Keep Lily safe. The morning sun cast long shadows across my front porch as I stared at the message, my hands shaking. The box seemed to mock me with its cheerful presentation. I snatched it up before Lily could see it on her way to breakfast. Mommy, who brought presents? Her little voice carried from the kitchen. No presents, baby. Just junk mail. I shoved the box into the outdoor trash bin, hearing the pastries thud against the bottom. Finish your cereal. Max appeared in the doorway, adjusting his tie. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I thrust my phone at him. Your sister. Again. His face darkened as he read the text. We don't know it's from her. The eclairs on our doorstep were just a coincidence then? What eclairs? I yanked open the trash bin, pulling out the pink box. These. The ones that could kill our daughter. The ones your sister left because she thinks I'm making up Lily's allergy for attention. You don't know Jessica left these. Who else would it be, Max? Who else keeps pushing this? Your mother enables her, your father thinks we're being dramatic, and Jessica. I stopped, catching Lily watching us from the kitchen window. Max lowered his voice. We talked about this. Jessica's going through a rough time since the divorce. So she gets to endanger our daughter? That's your answer? That's not what I... Daddy? Lily pressed her face against the window screen. Are you fighting? No, princess. Max forced a smile. Mommy and I are just talking. Go finish breakfast. I waited until she disappeared before continuing. Someone warned me about her, Max. A stranger took the time to warn me about your sister. What does that tell you? He rubbed his temples. It tells me someone's trying to cause trouble. Jessica wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't leave allergens on our doorstep? Wouldn't tell everyone at Christmas dinner that I'm just being overprotective? Wouldn't slip eggs into the cookies at Lily's birthday party? That was an accident. She apologized. After Lily spent 3 hours in the emergency room. My voice cracked. Our daughter could have died. Max's phone chimed, a message from Jessica. His face tightened as he read it. What now? She wants us to come to dinner tonight. Says she has something important to discuss. No. Ava. I said no. I'm done pretending everything's fine. I'm done watching you choose your sister over your daughter's safety. I'm not choosing. Then prove it. Tell her no. Tell her why. Max's silence told me everything. I grabbed my phone and typed out a message to the unknown number. Who are you? The response came immediately. Someone who knows what Jessica is capable of. Someone who's seen this before. I looked up at Max, still standing there with conflict written across his face. Your sister is planning something. And if you won't protect our daughter, I will. What are you going to do? I met his gaze, feeling something hard and cold settle in my chest. Whatever I have to. The sound of Lily humming in the kitchen floated through the window, innocent, unaware of the war brewing around her. I made my decision then. Jessica wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that mothers are the most dangerous players of all. My mother arrived like a storm front, all crackling energy and dark predictions. She took one look at the texts on my phone and started pacing our living room, her bracelets jangling with each sharp turn. This woman tried to poison my granddaughter, and you're still letting her play happy families? She fixed Max with a stare that could strip paint. Where exactly is your spine, young man? Maya, my father warned from his spot on the couch. Always the mediator, even now. Max stood by the window, shoulders rigid. Jessica's going through a difficult time. A difficult time? My mother's laugh could have cut glass. My difficult times never involved attempting to prove my niece's medical condition was fake. But perhaps I'm old-fashioned that way. I watched Lily in the backyard through the window, safe in her own world with her chalk drawings. The morning's discovery of the eclairs felt like it happened in another lifetime. We need to be strategic about this, my father said, leaning forward. Cutting off family entirely isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's about setting boundaries. Boundaries? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. We've tried boundaries. We've tried talking. We've tried everything except actually holding Jessica accountable. My phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Check Jessica's social media. The private groups she's in. You need to see what she's saying about you. Max read over my shoulder, his face draining of color. Ava, don't. But I was already pulling up Facebook, diving into the rabbit hole. It took 10 minutes to find what the stranger meant. Jessica had joined a group called Fake Allergies, Real Drama, 3 months ago. There, under a pseudonym, she'd been posting about us. About Lily. She thinks she's so special with her deadly egg allergy. My sister-in-law is just attention-seeking. Using my niece as a prop. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Max grabbed the phone, scrolling through the posts. His hands shook. I'll talk to her, he said. This isn't. She wouldn't. Wouldn't what? My mother moved to stand beside me, one hand on my shoulder. Wouldn't publicly mock her niece's life-threatening condition? Wouldn't try to prove it's fake by leaving dangerous food on their doorstep? Wake up, Max. Your sister is waging war on your daughter. It's not that simple, Max protested, but his voice wavered. My father cleared his throat. Actually, son, it is that simple. Your wife and daughter or your sister's dangerous delusions. Choose. The silence that followed was deafening. Max stared out the window at Lily, who was now showing her chalk masterpiece to her favorite stuffed rabbit. I need time, he finally said. Time? My mother's voice rose. Time for what? For Jessica to succeed in proving her point? For Lily to end up in the hospital again? Or worse? Maya, my father warned again, but this time she rounded on him. No, David. No more playing nice. No more family politics. This ends now. She turned to Max. You have 24 hours to handle your sister, or I'm calling my lawyer friend. We'll see how Jessica likes explaining her social media posts to a judge while we file for a restraining order. Max's face hardened. You wouldn't. Try me. My mother's voice was steel. That's my granddaughter she's endangering. I've watched this family dance around Jessica's issues for years. Not anymore. I felt something shift in the room, like a fault line finally giving way. Max grabbed his keys from the counter. I need some air, he muttered, heading for the door. Running to Jessica? I called after him. Or just running away? He paused, hand on the doorknob. I don't know anymore. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. Through the window, I watched him drive away, wondering if he'd come back this time. My mother's hand found mine, squeezing tight. You're doing the right thing, honey. Sometimes protecting your child means making impossible choices. I nodded, watching Lily create her chalk world outside, still innocent to the war being waged around her. I know. I just wish it didn't feel like I'm losing everything else in the process. Not everything, my father said quietly. Just the things that were already poisoned. My phone buzzed again. There's more you need to know about Jessica. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. The coffee shop buzzed with morning chatter as I waited for my mystery texter. 3 days had passed since Max left, and the silence from him felt like an open wound. My hands trembled slightly as I checked my phone again. "Are you Ava Thompson?" I looked up to find a woman in her 40s, clutching a leather portfolio. Her resemblance to Jessica was subtle but unmistakable, something in the set of her jaw, the sharp angle of her cheekbones. "I'm Rachel," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Jessica's former sister-in-law. The pieces clicked into place. From her first marriage. The one she destroyed. Just like she's trying to destroy yours. Rachel opened her portfolio, pulling out a stack of papers. Jessica has a pattern. When she feels threatened, she fixates on proving someone wrong. With me, it was my son's autism. With you, it's Lily's allergy. My throat tightened. What did she do to your son? Tried to prove he was just badly behaved. That I was making up his condition for attention. Rachel's smile was bitter. Sound familiar? How did it end? With my son in the hospital after she triggered a meltdown to prove her point. And my ex-husband still defended her. She pushed a manila envelope across the table. These are the police reports, medical records, and screenshots from when she did it to us. You'll need them. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. Need them for what? For when she goes too far. Because she will. Rachel leaned forward. Jessica's hosting a family dinner next weekend. Don't let Lily anywhere near it. My phone buzzed, a message from Max, coming home tonight. We need to talk. Jessica wants to make things right. Rachel saw my expression change. Let me guess. She's offering an olive branch? A family dinner. To make amends. That's how it started with us too. Rachel stood, straightening her blazer. Check the records. Page 3. That dinner put my son in the emergency room. I was still processing this when my phone rang. Nancy, my mother-in-law. Ava, dear, please be reasonable about the dinner. Jessica's prepared something special for Lily. She wants to prove she can be trusted with her niece's condition. The hair on my neck stood up. What exactly has she prepared? Oh, just some lovely desserts. She's been practicing egg-free recipes. Nancy's voice turned pleading. She misses her niece. And Max. Well, he's struggling with all this division. Rachel was watching me, her expression grim. I thought of the records in the envelope, of hospital visits and police reports. What dessert specifically, Nancy? I'm not sure, dear. Some sort of custard, I think. And meringues. My blood ran cold. Meringues are made with egg whites. Oh. A pause. Well, I'm sure Jessica knows what she's doing. She's been researching. I hung up, my hands shaking as I opened the envelope. Page 3 detailed a family dinner where Jessica had, accidentally, served food she claimed was allergen-free. The hospital report that followed made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed again. Jessica this time. I know we've had our differences, but I want to make it right. I've been learning about egg allergies. Let me prove it to you. Another message followed, a photo of beautifully arranged desserts with the caption, all safe for Lily. Heart suit. I zoomed in on the meringues, their perfectly whipped peaks a death sentence disguised as reconciliation. The rage that filled me was cold and clarifying. What did you do? I asked Rachel. After the hospital? Nothing. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. But I'm here now, aren't I? I gathered the documents, my decision made. Thank you for the warning. But I won't need these. No. No. Because Jessica's not getting anywhere near my daughter again. And if Max can't understand that. I stood, feeling stronger than I had in days. Then he can join her for all those family dinners without us. Rachel nodded slowly. Just remember, she'll try to make you look like the unreasonable one. The paranoid mother. Let her try. I headed for the door, already composing a message to Max. Some things are worth looking unreasonable for. The divorce papers sat untouched on my kitchen counter, a white flag I wasn't ready to wave. Max had dropped them off this morning, along with his house key. Just in case, he'd said, not meeting my eyes. Jessica thinks it might be best if we take some time apart. Jessica thinks. Of course she does. Lily's small voice broke through my thoughts. Mommy, why was Daddy crying in the car? I turned from the window where I'd been watching his brake lights disappear. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're trying to make hard decisions. Like when you have to choose between chocolate and vanilla? Something like that, baby. I forced a smile. Want to help me make dinner? She climbed onto her step stool, reaching for the pasta box. Can we invite Aunt Jessica? The pasta slipped from my hands, scattering across the floor like broken promises. Why would you want that? She came to school today. Said she misses me. The world tilted sideways. She what? At recess. She brought cookies for everyone. Lily's face brightened. She said they were special ones just for me. My phone was in my hand before she finished speaking, dialing the school's number with trembling fingers. The principal's voice was apologetic, concerned. Yes, Jessica had visited. Yes, she'd brought treats. No, they hadn't known about the restraining order I'd filed yesterday. Did you eat any cookies? I asked Lily, trying to keep my voice steady. She shook her head. Teacher said no food from strangers. But Aunt Jessica isn't a stranger. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. She looks so much like Max in her school uniform. Shame she inherited your paranoia instead of his common sense. Another message followed. The cookies were perfectly safe. This time. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I called Max, but it went straight to voicemail. His sister had already gotten to him, poisoning him against me with tales of my escalating behavior and dangerous paranoia. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Rachel, holding a manila envelope. There's something else you need to see, she said when I opened the door. About Jessica's first marriage. Not now, I hissed, gesturing to Lily picking up pasta behind me. Yes, now. Rachel's voice was urgent. Because she's filing for partial custody of Lily. The room spun. She's what? Through Max. She's convinced him you're unstable. That your obsession with Lily's allergy is a form of Munchausen by proxy. Rachel pressed the envelope into my hands. The same thing she did to me. Only this time, she's learned from her mistakes. She's doing it legally. I opened the envelope with numb fingers, finding court documents from Rachel's custody battle. The similarities were stark, the same accusations. The same concerned family members testifying about paranoid behavior and fabricated medical conditions. How did you fight it? Rachel's laugh was hollow. I didn't. I lost. It took 3 hospitalizations before anyone believed me about Jessica. By then, the damage was done. Lily appeared beside me, tugging at my sleeve. Mommy, can we make the pasta now? In a minute, sweetheart. I turned back to Rachel. What do I do? You run. Her voice was steel. Take Lily and run. Because Jessica won't stop until she proves she's right, even if it kills your daughter in the process. My phone buzzed again. Max, my lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I'm sorry, but Jessica showed me the evidence. You need help, Ava. Evidence. Of course. Jessica had been building her case all along, documenting every paranoid reaction, every unreasonable demand about Lily's safety. Each protective instinct twisted into proof of my instability. Lily hummed as she arranged the fallen pasta into patterns on the floor, oblivious to the war being waged over her life. I watched her, remembering the hospital visits, the close calls, the terror in her eyes when she couldn't breathe. I won't run, I told Rachel. I won't give them that ammunition. Then what will you do? I picked up the divorce papers, my decision crystallizing like ice. I'm going to destroy Jessica. Not with revenge, not with accusations. With truth. Every last ugly bit of it. Even if it costs you Max. Max chose his side. I looked at Lily, still playing innocently on the floor. Now I'm choosing mine. The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Lily's pale face as she struggled to breathe. I clutched her small hand, watching the monitors spike and fall while doctors rushed around us. My phone buzzed incessantly, Max, Jessica, their parents, but I couldn't look away from my daughter's oxygen levels dropping. Mrs. Thompson? The doctor's voice cut through the chaos. We found traces of egg protein in her system. Did she eat anything unusual today? The birthday cupcakes at school. The ones Nancy had brought for the class party. Special treats from Grandma, she'd said. All safe for Lily. I'd trusted her. After everything, I'd trusted her. Your mother-in-law brought them? The doctor made notes while a nurse adjusted Lily's fore. We'll need to document this for the report. Report? Given the circumstances and previous incidents, we're required to report suspected intentional exposure. My phone buzzed again. Jessica, Mom didn't know. She was trying to help. Stop making this bigger than it needs to be. The monitor beeped as Lily's numbers stabilized. Her eyes fluttered open, finding mine. Mommy? My throat hurts. I know, baby. I know. I smoothed her hair back, feeling the heat of fever under my palm. Just rest. The door opened, and Max burst in, Jessica close behind him. The sight of them together sent rage coursing through my veins. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. She's my daughter too, Max started, but stopped when he saw Lily's condition. Oh God. Jessica stepped forward, all concern and innocence. Mom feels terrible. She really thought. Thought what? I stood, placing myself between them and Lily's bed. Thought she knew better than every doctor, every warning? Thought she'd prove me wrong by risking my daughter's life? It was a mistake, Max pleaded. Mom would never intentionally. Like you'd never intentionally let your sister into Lily's school? Like Jessica would never intentionally bring allergens to our house? My laugh was bitter. How many unintentional attempts on our daughter's life are you willing to excuse? The doctor returned, eyeing the tension in the room. I need to speak with Mrs. Thompson alone about the incident report. Incident report? Jessica's mask slipped slightly. That's not necessary. It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that could have killed her. I turned to the doctor. I want to press charges. The room went silent except for the steady beep of monitors. You can't be serious, Max whispered. Watch me. I pulled out my phone, showing them the text thread with Nancy about the cupcakes. Your mother knew about Lily's allergy. She chose to ignore it. Just like you chose to let Jessica into that school. Just like you're choosing now. If you do this, Jessica said, her voice hard, there's no going back. Think about what you're destroying. I am. I looked at Lily, small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. I'm thinking about exactly what I'm saving. Max stepped toward me, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Ava, please. We can work this out. Family counseling, stricter boundaries. Family counseling won't fix this. I met his eyes, seeing the moment he realized what was coming. I've already called my lawyer. I'm filing for sole custody. Jessica's laugh was sharp. You really think a judge will give you custody when you're the one creating all this drama? I think the hospital reports, school incidents, and documented threats will speak for themselves. I nodded to the doctor. Shall we discuss that report now? This isn't you, Max said quietly. The Ava I married wouldn't tear apart her family like this. The Ava you married trusted her family to protect her daughter. I watched Lily's chest rise and fall. Each breath a reminder of how close we'd come to losing her. That Ava was wrong. As I followed the doctor out, Jessica called after me, "You'll regret this. When you're alone with no one but your paranoia for company, you'll regret this." I turned back, meeting her gaze steadily. "No, Jessica. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." The door closed behind me, cutting off their protests. In the hallway, I finally let my hands shake, let the tears come. But my resolve didn't waver. Sometimes protecting your child means becoming the monster others already think you are. The courthouse hallway stretched before me like a gauntlet. Jessica sat with her perfect posture on one bench, Max and his parents on another. My lawyer's words echoed in my head, "They're pushing for supervised visitation only. They have documentation suggesting psychological manipulation on your part." Rachel appeared beside me, pressing a coffee into my hands. "You look like hell. They're going to take her." My voice sounded distant, even to myself. "Jessica's won." "Not yet." Rachel nodded toward the courtroom doors. "But you need to know, she's bringing in her old therapist to testify." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. About what? About how she helped Jessica overcome her own paranoid delusions about her ex-husband. She's building a parallel narrative. The doors opened, and Henry Thompson approached, his expression grave. "Ava, there's still time to withdraw the charges. To handle this as a family. Like you handled Lily's hospitalization." The words felt like ash on my tongue. "Or Jessica's school visit. We're trying to protect you from yourself." He glanced at Rachel. "And from those encouraging your paranoia." Inside the courtroom, Jessica's lawyer presented medical records, not Lily's, but mine. Therapy sessions from after my mother's death 10 years ago. Anxiety diagnosis. Panic attacks. "Mrs. Thompson exhibits a pattern of hypervigilance," the lawyer said. "Her daughter's alleged allergy provides a focus for her anxiety, allowing her to control her family through fear." Max wouldn't look at me as they presented his statement. Ava's concerns started reasonably but became obsessive. "She sees threats everywhere, isolates our daughter, and punishes any questioning of her decisions." Jessica took the stand next, tears glistening. "I just wanted to help my niece live normally. To show her she didn't have to be afraid. But Ava..." She dabbed her eyes. "She turned everyone against me. Like she's turning my brother against his whole family." My lawyer presented the hospital records, the documented incidents, but Jessica's therapist dismissed them. Anxiety sufferers often create self-fulfilling prophecies. The more Mrs. Thompson focused on potential allergens, the more likely her daughter was to experience stress-induced symptoms. During recess, I found Max alone in the hallway. "Did you really believe all that?" I asked. "Or did Jessica write your statement for you?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." He looked exhausted. "But Lily deserves a normal life. Lily deserves to live." My voice cracked. "But you've chosen to believe I'm crazy rather than admit your sister is dangerous. Maybe we're all dangerous in our own ways." He finally met my eyes. "Maybe we're all just hurting each other trying to prove we're right." Back in the courtroom, the judge reviewed the evidence. My hands shook as Jessica's latest text lit up my phone. "It's not too late to stop this. Admit you need help. Let us help you." The judge spoke, given the concerning pattern of behavior and the family's willingness to support supervised visitation. "I'm granting temporary custody to the father, with supervised visitation for the mother pending psychological evaluation." The room spun. Through the blur, I saw Jessica smile. Additionally, the judge continued. "The court orders Mrs. Thompson to undergo psychiatric assessment before any unsupervised contact with the minor child." Rachel grabbed my arm as my knees buckled. "This isn't over. But it felt over. It felt like drowning. In the hallway, Nancy approached with Lily's backpack. "We'll take good care of her, Ava. Once you get help." "Don't." I backed away, watching Lily clutch Max's hand, confused and scared. "Just don't." Jessica stood nearby, victorious. "I told you you'd regret this." Something inside me snapped. Not with rage or despair, but with clarity. "You know what's funny, Jessica? You've won. You've taken everything. And you still can't admit what this is really about. This is about getting you help. This is about the baby you lost." The words hit her like a physical blow. "The one you couldn't protect. That's why you can't stand watching me protect Lily." Her face went white. Behind her, Max stiffened. "What baby?" he asked. Jessica's mask cracked, just for a moment. But it was enough. I walked away, leaving chaos in my wake. They'd taken my daughter, my marriage, my sanity in their eyes. But they'd forgotten something crucial. A mother with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous creature of all. The Thompson family estate loomed before me, its windows glowing amber in the twilight. Inside, they'd gathered for Henry's birthday dinner, the perfect family portrait, minus the inconvenient mother who'd lost custody of her child. I hadn't been invited. But Rachel's text made it clear I needed to be here. "Jessica's planning something. She's taking Lily on a trip tomorrow. Alone." The front door opened before I could knock. Max stood there, tension radiating from every line of his body. "You shouldn't be here." "Where's Lily?" "In the kitchen with Jessica. Making cookies." His voice cracked on the last word. "Ava, about what you said in court. The baby she lost?" I pushed past him into the foyer. "Ask her about Thomas. Her first husband's son." The kitchen door swung open, and Jessica emerged, flour dusting her perfect black dress. She froze when she saw me. "You're not welcome here." "Funny. That's what Thomas's father said to you after the incident." I watched her face pale. 3 years old, wasn't he? When you decided he was faking his peanut allergy? "Get out." Her voice shook. "Mommy?" Lily appeared behind Jessica, cookie dough on her cheeks. "Baby, what are you eating?" My heart raced. "Special cookies. Aunt Jessica says they're safe." Nancy emerged from the dining room, followed by Henry. "Ava, you're violating the court order. Did Jessica tell you about Thomas?" I kept my eyes on my daughter. "About how she knew better than his doctors too." "That was different," Jessica whispered. "Was it? Or did you just learn to hide the evidence better this time?" Max stepped forward. "What evidence?" I pulled out my phone, playing the video Rachel had found. Security footage from Jessica's old house, Thomas convulsing on the kitchen floor while Jessica insisted he was faking. "Turn it off," Jessica demanded. "He survived," I continued. "But you lost custody. Lost your marriage. Lost the baby you were carrying from the stress. So you came here, started fresh. Found a new family to control." I was trying to help him. Jessica's composure cracked. "Children need to learn they can't manipulate. Lily." My voice was steel. "Put down the cookie." But Aunt Jessica said, "Now." The cookie dropped, crumbling on the floor. Max rushed forward, grabbing a piece. "These smell like." He looked at his sister in horror. "Jessica, tell me you didn't." "She needs to learn." Jessica's voice rose hysterically. "Like Thomas needed to learn. I'm helping her. By feeding her eggs?" Max's face contorted. "Our daughter? After everything? She's not sick. She's just like Thomas, seeking attention. Thomas almost died." I moved toward Lily, but Jessica blocked my path. "He was fine." He was always fine. Until his father turned him against me, like you're turning Lily. Step away from my daughter. She's not yours anymore. Jessica's smile was brittle. The court proved you're unstable. Paranoid. Just like Thomas's father. Max grabbed her arm. How many times? What? How many times have you tested Lily? Given her things that could kill her? Jessica's silence was damning. The birthday cupcakes, Nancy whispered. You told me they were safe. They were. She's fine. She's always fine. Because we catch it in time. I lunged forward as Lily started coughing. This time, no one stopped me from reaching her. As I scooped her up, feeling her throat for swelling, Max was already dialing 911. Get her EpiPen from my car, I ordered, and he ran. Jessica stood frozen, watching Lily struggle for breath. I didn't. I never meant. Yes, you did. I held my daughter close, feeling her wheeze. You meant to prove you were right, no matter the cost. Just like with Thomas. The sirens wailed in the distance as Max returned with the EpiPen. As we worked to save our daughter, I caught Jessica's eye one last time. The difference is, this time you're not going to get away with it. Her face crumpled as Henry picked up his phone. I'm calling the police. Sometimes revenge isn't about what you do. It's about forcing others to finally see the truth they've been denying all along. The courthouse steps felt different this time. No Jessica waiting to ambush me, no Max avoiding my eyes. Just Rachel beside me, holding a thick folder of evidence. Thomas's father is willing to testify, she said quietly. Along with 3 other families who experienced similar incidents with Jessica. Inside, the same judge who had stripped my custody rights now reviewed the police reports, medical records, and security footage. Jessica sat alone at her table, her lawyer conspicuously absent. Max entered with his parents, choosing seats directly behind me. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Given the new evidence, the judge began, and the criminal charges pending against Jessica Martin, this court reverses its previous custody ruling. Full custody is restored to Ava Thompson, with supervised visitation for Maxwell Thompson pending family counseling. Jessica's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. They're all lying. All of them. Thomas, Lily, every single. Sit down, Miss Martin, the judge ordered. Your psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I felt nothing watching the bailiff lead her away. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a bone-deep exhaustion. In the hallway, Nancy touched my arm. We should have listened. Should have seen. Yes, I said simply. You should have. Henry cleared his throat. We'd like to be part of Lily's life. To make amends. That's not my decision anymore. I met their eyes steadily. Lily will decide when she's ready. If she's ever ready. Max followed me to my car, his footsteps echoing in the parking garage. I failed you both. Yes. I want to fix it. You can't. I turned to face him. Some things break permanently, Max. Trust is one of them. Then why agree to family counseling? Because Lily loves you. And she deserves a father who'll fight for her as hard as I did. I opened my car door. Even if that means learning how. At home, Lily was drawing at the kitchen table while my mother prepared dinner. Her latest masterpiece showed 2 figures, just her and me. Baby, I said, sitting beside her. Remember how we talked about being brave? She nodded, adding a heart between the figures. Sometimes being brave means giving people second chances. And sometimes it means protecting yourself by keeping distance. Do you understand? Like with Aunt Jessica? Yes. And with anyone who doesn't respect your boundaries. She considered this, then drew a 3rd figure off to the side, smaller, separate. Is Daddy going to live with us again? No, sweetheart. But he's learning to be a better father. And that's its own kind of brave. The doorbell rang. A delivery, Jessica's diary, sent by her court-appointed psychiatrist. A post-it note attached read, "This might help you understand. Your choice whether to read it." I stood there holding the last piece of Jessica's unraveling, remembering her face when she talked about Thomas. About the baby she lost. About control and denial and the desperate need to be right. The garbage can lid creaked as I lifted it, the diary dropping into darkness with a soft thud. Some answers aren't worth the cost of knowing them. My phone buzzed. "Rachel, Thomas's father asked if you'd speak at the hearing next month." I watched Lily draw, safe and whole and finally free from the weight of others' denial. My response was simple, no. Our story is finished. My mother smiled from the stove. Dinner's ready. Real life awaits. And that's the thing about revenge, it's not in the winning or the punishment or even the justice served. It's in the quiet moments after, when you realize the battle that consumed you was never about winning at all. It was about learning when to fight, when to walk away, and when to simply live. Lily held up her drawing, now complete. A rainbow arched over our figures, bright and bold against the storm clouds she'd added in the background. "Is it finished?" I asked. She nodded, reaching for fresh paper. "This one is. I'm ready to draw something new." Aren't we all, I thought, watching her begin again. Aren't we all?
I'm Victoria, and I guess you could say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Not that we were filthy rich or anything, but my childhood was pretty damn good. Mom and Dad? They were like something out of a rom-com, always holding hands, stealing kisses when they thought I wasn't looking. We lived in this cozy little house in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Every weekend was like a mini adventure. Dad would pack us all into our beat-up station wagon, and off we'd go. Sometimes it was a hike in the nearby state park, other times a trip to the local cinema to catch the latest blockbuster. School was, well, school. I wasn't the popular kid, but I wasn't the outcast either. Just your average student trying to navigate the minefield of adolescence. I had a small group of friends, real friends, not those fake ones who only hang around when it's convenient. High school flew by in a blur of exams, awkward school dances, and late-night study sessions fueled by too much caffeine and junk food. Before I knew it, graduation was looming on the horizon. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with Mom and Dad, a stack of college brochures spread out in front of us. "So, Vicky," Dad said, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, "any idea what you want to do with your life?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and looking forward to. "I want to be a cardiologist," I blurted out. Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks that parents seem to perfect, a whole conversation without a single word. "All right," Dad finally said. "If this is what you really want, we'll make it happen." Getting into med school was just the beginning. The next 4 years were even more intense than undergrad. There were times I thought my brain might explode from all the information I was trying to cram into it. But there were amazing moments too. The first time I successfully drew blood from a patient, after a few embarrassing misses. The day I correctly diagnosed a heart murmur during rounds. The moment I realized that all this hard work was actually turning me into a doctor. Graduation day was surreal. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I saw my parents in the audience. Mom was crying, of course, and even Dad looked misty-eyed. As we left the auditorium, Dad threw his arm around my shoulders. "So, Dr. Adams," he said with a grin, "what's next?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the future on my shoulders. "Now," I said, "I become a cardiologist." Little did I know, my journey was far from over. In fact, the real challenges were just beginning. Fresh out of med school, I dove headfirst into my career at a private clinic in the city. The hours were long and grueling, but I loved every minute of it. I was finally doing what I'd dreamed of for so long, helping people, saving lives. As the months flew by, my hard work started to pay off. My bank account grew, and for the first time in my life, I had more money than I knew what to do with. On a whim, I walked into a car dealership one day and drove out in a sleek new sedan. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, bought with my own hard-earned money. A few months later, I signed the mortgage papers on a spacious apartment in a nice part of town. As I stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I was living the dream I'd worked so hard for. With the holidays approaching, I decided to take a few days off to visit my parents. I hadn't seen them in months, and I was excited to share my success with them. But as soon as I walked through the door of my childhood home, I knew something was off. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mom and Dad were in the same room, but they might as well have been on different planets. The warm, loving atmosphere I remembered was gone, replaced by a cold, uncomfortable silence. At dinner, the tension was palpable. Mom and Dad barely looked at each other, let alone spoke. I tried to fill the silence with stories about work, but my words fell flat in the frosty air between them. Later that night, I cornered Mom in the kitchen while she was doing the dishes. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "You and Dad, you're acting like strangers." Mom's hand stilled in the soapy water. She didn't turn around, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "It's nothing, honey," she said, her voice tight. "People change, that's all. Your father and we're just different people now." But I knew my mother. I could hear the pain behind her words. "Mom, please, tell me the truth." She sighed, finally turning to face me. The sadness in her eyes broke my heart. "Your father, he got a promotion at work a few months ago. With it came a personal assistant, a young woman." My stomach dropped. "Mom, are you saying?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He's been staying late at the office, more and more. I think she might be his mistress." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My dad, the man I'd idolized my whole life, cheating on my mom? It didn't seem possible. "I'm going to talk to him," I said, anger rising in my chest. "How dare he do this to you?" "No, Victoria," Mom said, grabbing my arm. "I've already decided. I'm going to file for divorce. I've talked to a lawyer, everything's planned out." I stared at her in shock. "Divorce? But can't you work it out?" She smiled sadly. "Some things can't be fixed, sweetheart. And I don't want you to get caught in the middle of this. I have no hard feelings towards your father, and I don't want you to either. These things, they happen in life. We need to be understanding." I couldn't believe how calm she was being about all this. If it were me, I'd be furious, devastated. But here was my mom, handling it all with grace and dignity. The divorce hit like a hurricane, leaving destruction in its wake. Mom, bless her heart, didn't go down without a fight. She demanded half of everything and extra compensation for Dad's infidelity. To his credit, Dad didn't argue. He paid up without a fuss. But the real kicker? Before the ink was dry on the divorce papers, Dad married his assistant. His mistress. My new stepmother. I nearly choked when I saw her. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than me. 22 years younger than Dad, for crying out loud. She was closer to being my friend than my stepmother. Not that I wanted anything to do with her. I kept my distance, limiting my interactions with Dad and his child bride to bare necessities. It hurt to see him with her, to see how quickly he'd moved on while Mom was still picking up the pieces. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw me another curveball. I got an offer to work at a prestigious clinic in another city. 2 years, great pay, and a chance to study under Dr. Harriet Chen, one of the most renowned cardiologists in the country. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. I called Mom as soon as I got the news. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she exclaimed, genuine joy in her voice. You have to take it. This could be huge for your career." Her enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time in months, I felt excitement bubbling up inside me. This was my chance for a fresh start, away from all the drama. Word of my impending move must have spread because Dad called me the next day. "Vicky," he said, his voice hesitant, "I heard you're moving." "Yeah, Dad. Got a great job offer in." He cut me off. "Listen, I need to ask you something. It's a bit awkward. Things at work, they're not great. My income's taken a hit. I was wondering, could Sarah and I use your apartment while you're gone? And maybe, borrow your car?" I was speechless. After everything that had happened, he had the nerve to ask this? "I don't know, Dad. I need to think about it." I hung up, my mind whirling. Part of me wanted to tell him to get lost. But another part, he was still my dad. I called Mom, dreading her reaction. To my surprise, she was calm. "It's your apartment, your car, Victoria," she said. "You're an adult. You get to decide what to do with your things. I won't be offended, whatever you choose." Her maturity made me feel small and petty. After a sleepless night, I called Dad and agreed. The day I handed over the keys was surreal. Dad looked sheepish, but Sarah, she had this smug look that made my skin crawl. As I handed Dad the keys, Sarah piped up. "Well, isn't this nice?" The keys finally returning to their rightful owner. She nodded at Dad with a simpering smile. I stared at her, then at Dad, confusion and anger bubbling up inside me. Dad quickly pulled me aside. "Vicky, honey," he whispered, "I need you to play along. I may have told Sarah that the apartment and car are mine. That I've just been letting you use them." I gaped at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. This man, who I'd admired my whole life, was asking me to lie. To pretend I hadn't worked my ass off for everything I owned. In that moment, something inside me broke. The last shred of respect I had for my father vanished. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my dad's face, and made a decision. Without a word, I turned and walked out of my own apartment. 2 days later, I was on a plane to my new life in a new city. As the plane took off, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For 2 years, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this drama. I could focus on my work, on becoming the best doctor I could be. The 2 years in the new city flew by like a dream. I kept in touch with Mom regularly, our weekly Skype calls a lifeline to home. She looked better each time, the sparkle returning to her eyes as she built her new life. Dad, on the other hand, was a different story. Our calls were audio only. He claimed he couldn't figure out all this newfangled video stuff. I didn't push it. Hearing his voice was hard enough. I wasn't sure I could handle seeing him with his new wife. When my contract ended, I returned to my old city with mixed feelings. I was excited to start back at my old clinic, but dreading the family drama I'd left behind. The day I went to reclaim my apartment, I stood outside the familiar door, key in hand, heart pounding. But when I tried to unlock it, the key wouldn't turn. Frowning, I knocked loudly. The door swung open, revealing Sarah's annoyed face. "Oh," she said flatly. "It's you." I pushed past her into the apartment and froze, my jaw dropping. The place was unrecognizable. Gone were my tasteful, muted colors, replaced by garish bright hues that hurt my eyes. My carefully chosen furniture had vanished, switched out for modern pieces that clashed horribly with the overall design. But the real shock came when I stepped into what used to be my bedroom. It had been transformed into a nursery, complete with a crib and changing table. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, whirling to face Sarah. She smirked, resting a hand on her very pregnant belly. "We needed to make some changes. This is our home, after all." "Your home?" I sputtered. "This is my apartment." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "No, this is your father's apartment. He's just been letting you stay here out of the kindness of his heart. And now, as his wife, I'm the lady of the house." I opened my mouth to argue, to tell her the truth, but something made me hesitate. The sight of her swollen belly cooled my anger. I couldn't bring myself to stress out a pregnant woman, no matter how infuriating she was. I spent the next few hours seething, pacing the garishly redecorated living room. When Dad finally walked through the door, I pounced. "Dad, we need to talk. Now." He nodded, looking tired. "I know, Vicky, let's step outside." Once we were alone, I let loose. "What the hell, Dad? You let her completely trash my apartment? And what's this bullshit about it being your place?" He held up his hands placatingly. I know. It's complicated, sweetie." I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. "Things at work, they're not good. If Sarah knew we were living off your charity." "Please, Vicky, don't kick us out. Not with the baby coming." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream and rage and throw them both out on their ears. But looking at my father, this broken, pleading version of the strong man I once knew, I couldn't do it. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "We'll figure something out." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you, sweetheart. Oh, and there's one more thing." I braced myself. "What?" "I may have given Sarah your car. When I found out about the baby, I wanted to do something nice for her. I'll pay you back, I promise." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "It's fine, Dad. The clinic's not far, I can walk." He kissed my hand, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "You're an angel, Vicky. We'll make this work, you'll see." As I watched him go back inside, I tried to convince myself this could work. I'd be at the clinic most of the time anyway. Maybe I could even learn to get along with Sarah. I threw myself into work with renewed vigor. The clinic became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the tension at home. I'd leave before dawn and return long after dark, tiptoeing through the apartment to avoid waking Sarah or the newborn baby. 2 months into this routine, fate threw me a lifeline. I was grabbing a quick coffee at my favorite cafe when I quite literally bumped into him. Tall, with kind eyes and a crooked smile, Jake was charming from the moment he helped me mop up my spilled latte. "I'm so sorry," he said, handing me a wad of napkins. "Can I buy you a replacement?" One coffee turned into dinner, which turned into more dates. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other regularly. For the first time in months, I felt light, happy. Jake was funny, smart, and best of all, completely removed from my family drama. I started spending more and more time at his place, relishing the peace and normalcy. It was a blissful respite from the chaos at home. But reality has a way of intruding. One evening, I arrived home to find Sarah waiting for me, her face like thunder. "Where have you been?" she demanded, bouncing a fussy baby on her hip. I blinked, taken aback by her tone. "At work, then out." "Why?" She thrust a mop at me. "This place is a mess. Your father can't afford a housekeeper, so you need to pull your weight around here. I'm busy with the baby." Anger flared in my chest. "I'm not your maid, Sarah. I work 60-hour weeks saving lives. I'm not spending my free time cleaning up after you." Her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little freeloader. Living off your father's generosity and you can't even help out? Maybe we should kick you out, see how you like that." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sheer audacity of her threat was almost impressive. "Good luck with that," I said, turning away. For the next few days, I ignored Sarah's pointed looks and passive-aggressive comments about the state of the apartment. I focused on work and on Jake, counting the hours until I could escape to his place. Then, one afternoon, my world imploded. My phone rang, it was Jake. "Hey, you," I answered, smiling. "I was just thinking about you." "It's over," he cut me off, his voice cold. I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. "What? Jake, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Victoria. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I can't believe I fell for your act." Jake, I honestly have no idea. Save it, he snapped. We're done. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, stunned. What the hell had just happened? Seconds later, a message popped up. It was from Jake, a photo. My heart stopped as I opened it. It was me, locked in a passionate kiss with a man who definitely wasn't Jake. Except, it wasn't me. The woman in the photo looked like me, but something was off. The hair wasn't quite right, the posture, not quite mine. Realization dawned, along with a wave of fury. Sarah. This had Sarah written all over it. I tried calling Jake back, desperate to explain, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages bounced back, undelivered. He'd blocked me. I stormed into the apartment, fury radiating from every pore. Sarah sat on the couch, a smug smile playing on her lips. She knew exactly what she'd done. You, I snarled, advancing on her. What the hell have you done? Sarah's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. It was easy, really. A little Photoshop here, a few messages there. You'd be surprised what people will believe when they're jealous. The casual way she admitted to destroying my relationship made my blood boil. You fabricated that photo? And what messages? Oh, just a few posts on social media about how you're dating multiple men, looking for someone richer than your boyfriend. You know, the usual gold digger stuff. I was speechless with rage. How could someone be so callous, so cruel? Sarah's eyes narrowed. Now listen here, princess. You're going to start pulling your weight around here. Clean the house, do the laundry, take care of the baby when I need a break. Or else. Or else what? I spat. Or else I'll make sure your daddy knows what an ungrateful brat you are. He'll kick you out so fast your head will spin. That was it. The final straw. I threw my head back and laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You really don't get it, do you? I said, my voice dangerously low. This is MY apartment. I bought it with MY money. You're the ones who'll be out on the street if you don't apologize and help me fix things with Jake. Sarah's face contorted with rage. She opened her mouth to retort, but just then, the front door opened. Dad walked in, looking tired and confused at the tableau before him. Sarah immediately launched into a tirade. John, you won't believe what your daughter just said. She's threatening to kick us out. After everything we've done for her. She's an ungrateful, selfish bitch and I want her gone. Dad's eyes met mine, pleading. He leaned in close, whispering, Vicky, please. Just go along with it. Move out for a while. We'll sort this out later. I stared at him in disbelief. My own father, asking me to leave my own home. Something snapped inside me. No, I said, my voice steady and cold. I'm done playing along. This is my apartment. You two have until tonight to get out, or I'm calling the police and having you removed. Dad's face darkened. After everything I've done for you? I paid for your education. Your fancy medical degree. And I've more than repaid that by letting you live here rent-free and use my car, I shot back. We're even. Now get out. Sarah was screaming obscenities, Dad was trying to reason with me, but I stood firm. I watched in stony silence as they packed their things, Sarah alternating between cursing me and sobbing dramatically. As they walked out the door, Dad turned to me one last time. You'll regret this, Victoria. Mark my words. The silence in my newly reclaimed apartment was deafening. As I sat there, surrounded by the garish remnants of Sarah's decorating spree, I felt a sudden surge of determination. No more sacrifices. No more adjusting my life to accommodate others' lies and manipulations. It was time to take control. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew I could always count on, my mom. Mom, I said, my voice cracking. I need to talk to you. I poured out everything, the lies, the manipulation, the final confrontation. Mom listened patiently, her calm presence a balm to my frayed nerves. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. You did the right thing." Her words were like a warm embrace. "Thanks, Mom, but I've lost Jake. Sarah ruined everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Maybe not. Give me Jake's number." "Mom, what are you?" "Trust me, sweetheart. I've got this." Bewildered but hopeful, I gave her the number. The next day, I received a text from Mom asking me to meet her at our favorite cafe. When I arrived, my heart nearly stopped. There, sitting across from my mother, was Jake. Mom waved me over, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Sit down, Victoria." Jake and I were just having a lovely chat. Over the next hour, Mom laid out the whole sordid tale, Sarah's lies, Dad's deceptions, all of it. Jake listened, his face a mix of shock, anger, and shame. When Mom finished, Jake turned to me, his eyes brimming with remorse. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you, should have given you a chance to explain." I wanted to forgive him, but the hurt was still raw. "You believed the worst of me so easily, Jake. How can I trust you won't do it again?" To my utter shock, Jake slid out of his chair and dropped to one knee in the middle of the busy cafe. "Victoria Adams, I love you. I was an idiot, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. Please, forgive me?" The cafe had gone silent, all eyes on us. I felt a blush creeping up my neck, but looking into Jake's earnest eyes, I found my anger melting away. "Oh, get up, you big idiot," I said, tugging him to his feet. "Of course I forgive you." The cafe erupted in applause as Jake swept me into a kiss. Mom wiped away a tear, beaming at us both. Life has a funny way of working out. A couple of months later, we heard through the grapevine that Sarah had run off with a younger man, leaving Dad and the baby behind. She'd finally realized that Dad had no money or property to his name. Dad, in his desperation, tried to reconcile with Mom, but she refused him. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and career success. When Jake proposed, properly this time on a moonlit beach, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding day was perfect. Mom walked me down the aisle, radiant with joy. As I exchanged vows with Jake, I caught sight of an empty seat in the back, the one reserved for Dad. He hadn't come. A pang of sadness hit me, but as I looked back at Jake, at Mom, at all the people who truly loved and supported me, I realized I had everything I needed. My name's Rachel, and boy, do I have a story to tell you. It all started after I graduated college and landed a job as a flight attendant. Fresh-faced and eager, I was ready to take on the world, one flight at a time. It was on one of those routine flights that I met him, Jack. Tall, handsome, with a smile that could light up the cockpit. Yeah, you guessed it, he was the pilot. Our eyes met as I was doing the pre-flight checks, and I swear, it was like something out of a cheesy romance movie. From that moment on, Jack and I were inseparable. We'd grab coffee during layovers, swap stories about passengers, and before I knew it, we were dating. It was a whirlwind romance, the kind you read about in books or see in movies. We were young, in love, and the sky was literally the limit. 6 months after we met, Jack proposed. It wasn't anything fancy, just us, on the beach, during a stopover in Hawaii. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jack got down on one knee, sand sticking to his uniform pants, and pulled out a ring. We got married in a small ceremony a few months later. Life was perfect, or so I thought. It was about a year into our marriage. I was working a long-haul flight from New York to Tokyo. Everything was going smoothly until we hit some turbulence over the Pacific. I was in the middle of the cabin, making sure everyone was secure. That's when it happened. The plane suddenly dropped, like the bottom had fallen out of the sky. I was thrown off my feet, my body slamming into the overhead compartments before I hit the floor. Pain, blinding, white-hot pain shot through my back. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. Panic set in as I realized something was seriously wrong. The rest of the flight was a blur. Emergency landing in Anchorage, being rushed to the hospital, doctors poking and prodding. The diagnosis came like a punch to the gut, severe spinal injury. Just like that, my life in the sky was over. The airline was good about it, I'll give them that. They paid for my medical bills, offered me a hefty compensation. Jack was my rock through it all. He'd sit by my hospital bed, hold my hand as I went through physical therapy. "We'll get through this, Ratch," he'd say. "Together." And we did. Slowly but surely, I learned to walk again. But flying? That was off the table. The doctors were clear, any more stress on my spine could lead to permanent damage. So, I had to reinvent myself. The airline offered me a position in their ground staff, and I took it. It wasn't the same as being up in the air, but it was something. With the compensation money, Jack and I decided to buy a house. A beautiful, spacious place in a nice neighborhood. It was more than we needed, really, but Jack insisted. "You deserve this, Rachel," he said. "After everything you've been through." As Jack and I settled into our new house, I thought we were finally getting our happily ever after. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of my sister-in-law, Sarah. From the moment I met her, I could tell Sarah didn't like me. She was Jack's younger sister, married with a 4-year-old son, but there was always this edge to her. Like she was constantly sizing me up, looking for flaws. I remember the first time she visited our new house. Her eyes darted around, taking in every detail. "Well, isn't this nice?" she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You certainly landed on your feet after that accident, didn't you, Rachel? Some people have all the luck, I guess. Even when they fall, they land in a pile of money." I bit my tongue, not wanting to start a fight. Jack had always been close to his sister, despite her difficult personality. I didn't want to be the one to come between them. Over the next few months, Sarah's visits became more frequent, and her comments more biting. Every time she came over, it was like walking on eggshells. I tried to be the bigger person, to ignore her jabs and passive-aggressive remarks. But it was wearing me down. One day, after a particularly nasty comment about how I was milking my injury, I confronted Jack about it. "I can't take it anymore," I said, tears of frustration in my eyes. "Your sister hates me, and I don't know why." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's just, Sarah. She's always been jealous of others. It's not you, it's her. I'll talk to her, okay? She needs to back off." But talking to Sarah didn't seem to help. If anything, it made her more resentful. She'd make a show of being polite when Jack was around, but the moment he was out of earshot, the claws would come out. It all came to a head about a year after we moved in. Sarah showed up unannounced one afternoon, all smiles and sweetness. I was immediately on guard. "Rachel, darling," she cooed, and I had to resist the urge to check for flying pigs. "I have a huge favor to ask." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Well, you see, Tommy's 5th birthday is coming up," she said, referring to her son. "And I was wondering, could we possibly have his party here?" I must have looked shocked, because she quickly added, "It's just, your house is so beautiful, and I have some important business contacts I want to impress. It would mean so much to me." I hesitated. On one hand, this was Sarah, the woman who'd made my life miserable for the past year. On the other, maybe this was an olive branch? A chance to finally build a better relationship? Against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. In the weeks leading up to Tommy's birthday, I threw myself into party planning with gusto. I spent hours scouring the internet for party ideas, saving Pinterest boards, and watching YouTube tutorials. I wanted everything to be perfect, from the decorations to the food, right down to the party favors. The day before the party, I was a whirlwind of activity. I'd ordered beautiful decorations, balloons in Tommy's favorite colors, a custom banner, and even hired a face painter. The snacks were all prepared, a mix of kid-friendly treats and some fancier hors d'oeuvres for the adults. I'd even baked the cake myself, a 3-tiered masterpiece covered in fondant and decorated with little rocket ships. Tommy was going through a space phase. As I was putting the finishing touches on the living room decorations, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. "Everything ready for tomorrow? Remember, first impressions are everything." I rolled my eyes, but texted back a cheerful, "All set. It's going to be great." When morning finally came, I was up at the crack of dawn, double and triple checking everything. Jack had an early flight, so he kissed me goodbye and wished me luck before heading out. "You've got this," he said, giving me a reassuring smile. "And remember, it's just a kid's birthday party. Don't stress too much." I nodded, but inside, I knew it was more than just a party. It was my chance to finally prove myself to Sarah, to show her that I was a valuable part of this family. As the clock ticked closer to party time, I got dressed in my nicest outfit, a pretty floral dress that I hoped struck the right balance between casual and put together. I did my hair and makeup, wanting to look my best for Sarah's important business contacts. Just as I was giving the living room one final once-over, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt into my throat. This was it. Showtime. I opened the door with a bright smile, ready to welcome Sarah and Tommy. "Happy birthday, big guy," I said, kneeling down to Tommy's level. Sarah breezed past me, her eyes scanning the decorated living room. "Well, it looks adequate," she said, her tone making it clear that adequate was a stretch. I bit back a retort and instead held out the beautifully wrapped gift for Tommy. "Here you go, sweetie. I hope you like it." Sarah snatched the gift from my hands before Tommy could reach for it. "We'll open presents later," she said curtly. Then, her eyes locked onto mine, a strange glint in them. "Rachel, dear, I need you to go to the city park and take a nice long walk. Say, 2 or 3 hours?" I blinked, sure I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Sarah's smile tightened. "You heard me. I'll meet the guests myself. You're superfluous here." The words hit me like a slap. "Sarah, this is my home. I'm not going anywhere. I've spent weeks preparing for this party. I thought we could finally build a good relationship." Sarah's laughter cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "Oh, Rachel, you're so naive. I have no interest in being friends with you. None whatsoever." Before I could process what was happening, Sarah had grabbed my arm and was pushing me towards the door. I tried to resist, but she was surprisingly strong. "Sarah, stop. What are you doing?" With a final shove, I found myself stumbling out onto the front porch. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing in the quiet neighborhood. I stood there, stunned, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. I patted my pockets, realizing with growing horror that I had nothing but my phone. As if reading my thoughts, the door opened again. Sarah appeared, holding my purse and car keys. "Here," she said, tossing them at my feet. "Now get out of here. I don't want you embarrassing me in front of my friends." The door slammed shut again, leaving me alone in the driveway, staring at my own front door in disbelief. Numbly, I picked up my purse and keys and got into my car. My hands were shaking as I tried to figure out what to do. I dialed Jack's number, praying he'd pick up, but it went straight to voicemail. Of course, he was on a flight. In desperation, I called my mother-in-law. Surely she'd see reason. "Linda, thank God," I said, my voice cracking. "Sarah's thrown me out of my own house. She's having Tommy's party without me. You've got to help me." There was a pause, and then Linda's voice came back, cold and dismissive. "Rachel, dear, I'm sure you're exaggerating. I'll be there soon to celebrate with my daughter and grandson. This is their day. Why don't you just stay out for a while?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Linda, please." But she had already hung up. Tears of frustration and hurt welled up in my eyes. I wanted to march back into that house and throw everyone out. But then I thought of Tommy, innocent in all this, and Jack, who would be devastated if I caused a scene with his family. With shaking hands, I scrolled through my contacts and called Sarah's husband, Mark. "Rachel?" Mark's voice was surprised. "What's up?" I took a deep breath and explained everything that had happened. Mark listened in stunned silence. "I had no idea," he said when I finished. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. I didn't even know Sarah was planning to have the party at your place. I'm stuck at work, but I'll be there in about 3 hours. Can you hang tight until then?" I agreed, not knowing what else to do. Feeling lost and betrayed, I drove to a nearby cafe. As I sat there, nursing a coffee I couldn't taste, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. How had my attempt at building bridges turned into this nightmare? After what felt like an eternity, Mark's car pulled into the cafe parking lot. We drove up to my house in silence and walked in without knocking. The scene that greeted us was surreal. My living room was full of people I didn't recognize, all dressed to the nines. In the center of it all was Sarah, holding court like a queen at her coronation. Mark's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "What the hell is going on here?" The room fell silent. Sarah's head whipped around, her face draining of color when she saw us. She tried to pull Mark aside, her voice low and urgent. "Please, not in front of everyone. I can explain everything." But Mark wasn't having it. "No, Sarah, I want answers now." Under the weight of Mark's glare and the curious stares of the guests, Sarah finally cracked. "Fine," she hissed. "I invited Jason and his parents, okay?" She gestured to a smug-looking man in an expensive suit. "They're very influential, and they promised to help me with my business venture. I couldn't pass up the opportunity." Mark's face reddened. "So you used our son's birthday as a networking event? And what about my parents?" Sarah's next words made my blood run cold. "Your parents? Please. They're not exactly the kind of people who can help us get ahead. What was the point of inviting them?" A tense silence fell over the room. Then, to my horror, Jason, Sarah's ex, raised his champagne glass in a mocking toast. "No hard feelings, Mark," he said with a smirk. That was the last straw. Mark lunged at Jason, and suddenly my carefully planned party devolved into chaos. People were shouting, glasses were breaking, and in the middle of it all was Tommy, looking confused and scared. The party dissolved quickly after that. Guests hurried out, muttering apologies and avoiding eye contact. But Sarah wasn't done. Instead of apologizing to Mark or me, she cornered Jason and his parents, groveling and making excuses. "I'm so sorry about this," she simpered. "My husband doesn't understand how important networking is. I hope this hasn't ruined our chances of working together." As the last of the guests trickled out, I was left standing in my wrecked living room, surrounded by the ruins of the party I'd worked so hard to plan. Mark was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands, while Sarah continued to make excuses. Tommy had retreated to a corner, clutching the gift I'd given him earlier, looking lost and confused. When Jack finally returned from his trip, I broke down and told him everything. He pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time since the party, I felt safe. "I promise you," he whispered, "I won't let her treat you like this ever again. You have my full support." True to his word, Jack called Sarah that very evening. I could hear his raised voice from the other room, words like disrespectful and inexcusable cutting through the air. When he hung up, he looked drained but resolute. "She won't be bothering us again anytime soon," he assured me. But the drama was far from over. Over the next few weeks, we heard through the family grapevine that Sarah and Mark's marriage was imploding. Apparently, Mark's suspicions about Sarah's relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Jason, had reached a boiling point. One evening, Mark called us, sounding desperate. "I found messages," he said, his voice cracking. Hundreds of them, between Sarah and Jason. They'd been in constant contact before and after the party. My heart sank for Mark. "I'm so sorry," I said, not knowing what else to offer. That's not all, Mark continued. I did a paternity test on Tommy. I had to know. The situation was spiraling out of control. To make matters worse, Jack's parents seemed to have taken Sarah's side in all of this. One afternoon, I received a scathing call from Linda, my mother-in-law. How dare you turn my children against each other, she screeched into the phone. You've torn this family apart with your selfish behavior. I was stunned. Linda, I didn't do anything. Sarah. Don't you dare blame Sarah, she interrupted. She was just trying to better herself and her family. You're nothing but a self-centered homewrecker. Then came the day Mark received the paternity test results. He showed up at our doorstep, looking shell-shocked. Tommy's mine, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He's really mine. While this should have been a relief, it only seemed to complicate matters further. When Sarah found out about the test, she exploded. How dare you question my fidelity, she shrieked at Mark during a confrontation we unfortunately witnessed. Everything I've done has been for us, for our family. Mark scoffed. Sneaking around with your ex is for our family? You don't understand, she yelled back. Jason's mother has connections. I was trying to build a network, to create opportunities for us. But you, she pointed an accusing finger at Mark, you're too much of a loser to see the bigger picture. The argument escalated, with Sarah hurling insults and accusations. And then, in a move that left us all stunned, Sarah stormed out. She returned an hour later with packed bags, Tommy clutching her hand. I'm done, she announced coldly. I'm going to build my empire, with or without you. You can keep your precious paternity test. I'll be back for Tommy when I'm successful. With that, she walked out, leaving a devastated Mark and a confused Tommy behind. Jack and I exchanged a look, silently agreeing that our lives had just become infinitely more complicated. We had chosen our side in this family war, and there was no going back now. The following months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Jack and I found ourselves thrust into the role of impromptu babysitters, often looking after Tommy while Mark dealt with lawyers and court appearances. I couldn't help but feel a gnawing guilt. If I hadn't interrupted that party, would any of this have happened? One evening, as we were putting Tommy to bed after a long day of distracting him with games and stories, I confessed my feelings to Jack. I can't help thinking this is all my fault, I whispered, fighting back tears. Jack pulled me close, his voice firm but gentle. Rachel, listen to me. None of this is your fault. Sarah's always been like this, spoiled, selfish, unable to see or respect boundaries. You were just trying to be kind. She's the one who took advantage of that kindness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of legal battles, the divorce was finalized. Mark was awarded full custody of Tommy, with Sarah granted limited visitation rights. It felt like we could all finally breathe again. Then, to our surprise and joy, I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't an easy pregnancy, my old spinal injury from the plane accident made things complicated. I had to wear a supportive corset constantly, and there were days when the pain was almost unbearable. But every time I felt the baby move, every time I saw the grainy image on the ultrasound screen, I knew it was worth it. Jack was over the moon, doting on me hand and foot. We thought we'd finally put the drama behind us. We were wrong. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The doorbell rang, and Jack went to answer it. I heard his sharp intake of breath before I saw her. Sarah, standing on our doorstep, looking nothing like the polished, ambitious woman who'd stormed out of our lives years ago. I need to talk to Mark, she said, her voice hoarse. Please. Jack called Mark, who arrived within minutes, his face a mask of wary confusion. Sarah launched into her story as soon as he walked in. I've made a horrible mistake, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. The business, it all fell apart. Jason, he used me. When the project failed, he just left. I need help. They're demanding repayment. I thought maybe you could be a guarantor for a loan? The room fell silent. Tommy had stopped playing, watching the adults with wide, confused eyes. Mark took a deep breath. "No, Sarah," he said finally. "I won't be your guarantor, and I won't take you back. You made your choice years ago." Sarah's face crumpled. But what about Tommy? Don't you want him to have his mother back?" Mark's voice was steel. "Tommy has been just fine without you. We've moved on, Sarah. I think you should too." Just when we thought the dust had settled, Sarah made her grand reappearance. It was a crisp autumn morning, and I was enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping herbal tea on the porch, my very pregnant belly making even this simple task a bit of a challenge. The sound of tires screeching broke the tranquility. Sarah burst out of her car, her face a mask of desperation and anger. "Jack," she screamed, storming up our walkway. "I need to talk to you." Jack appeared at the door, his face hardening at the sight of his sister. "Sarah, you need to leave, now." But Sarah was beyond reason. She pointed an accusing finger at me. "This is all her fault. If she hadn't come into our lives, none of this would have happened." I felt a familiar knot of guilt forming in my stomach, but Jack's firm voice cut through my doubts. "That's enough, Sarah," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Rachel has done nothing but support this family, even when you tried to tear it apart. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. If you come here again, I'll call the police." For a moment, I thought Sarah might lunge at us. Instead, she spun on her heel and marched back to her car. As she peeled away, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The next morning, we woke to find Sarah had set up a tent on our front lawn. She'd fashioned a crude sign, "Family abandonment in progress, shame on you." "This is ridiculous," Jack muttered, reaching for his phone. True to his word, he called the police. The officers were sympathetic but explained that as long as Sarah remained on public property, there wasn't much they could do. They did, however, issue her a warning about harassment. This standoff continued for days. Sarah would shout at us whenever we left the house, beg Jack to help her when he came home from work, and tried to guilt-trip me about stealing her family. Finally, after a week of this nightmare, we got a call from Linda. "I've convinced Sarah to come home," she said, her voice tired. "I'm sorry for everything. I see now that she needs help, not enabling." True to Linda's word, Sarah packed up her tent that evening. As she drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the peace was short-lived. Jack found me in the nursery later that night, absently folding and refolding onesies. "Ratch," he said gently, "I've been thinking. Maybe we should sell the house. Move somewhere Sarah doesn't know about. Somewhere we can raise our baby in peace." The next few months were a whirlwind of real estate agents, packing boxes, and doctor's appointments. We found a smaller house in a quiet neighborhood across town, right next to a good school and a public library. It was perfect. Epilogue. It's been 5 years since we moved. Lily, our daughter, is a happy, healthy kindergartner, and Tommy, now a teenager, is a frequent visitor and doting cousin. Mark has found happiness with a kind woman who loves Tommy like her own. We hear from Linda occasionally. She tells us Sarah is working 2 jobs to pay off her debts and seems to be getting her life together. Part of me hopes that one day, she'll be ready to be a part of our lives again. But for now, we're content. I'm Kimberly, and this is the story of how my family fell apart. It all started when I was 7 years old, and my little brother Tommy turned 5. I remember the day clearly. Mom had taken Tommy to his first real music lesson. When they came back, she was practically floating on air. "Kim, come here," she called out, her voice high with excitement. I came running down the stairs, wondering what all the fuss was about. "Your brother is a musical genius." I didn't really know what that meant, but I could tell it was important. "That's great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "The teacher says he has perfect pitch," Mom continued, her eyes shining. Do you know how rare that is? He's going to be a star, I just know it. From that day on, it was all about Tommy. Mom quit her part-time job to focus on his career. She'd spend hours researching music competitions and TV shows for kids. Our living room turned into a mini recording studio, with a keyboard, microphone, and even a small karaoke machine. Don't get me wrong, Tommy was good. When he sang, his voice was clear and pure, like a little angel. But I couldn't help feeling left out. Mom was too wrapped up in Tommy's potential stardom, and Dad was barely around. He'd leave for work before I woke up and come home after I was in bed. On weekends, he'd tinker in the garage or watch TV, too exhausted to do much else. So, I learned to take care of myself. I'd make my own lunches, do my homework without being asked, and try not to bother anyone with my problems. It wasn't all bad, though. I had my books, my few close friends, and my grandma. Grandma was Mom's mother, but they couldn't have been more different. While Mom was all about the spotlight and fame, Grandma was down-to-earth and practical. She owned a small convenience store in town, and I started helping out there after school when I was 12. "You're a good worker, Kimberly," she'd say, smiling at me over her glasses. "Smart with money, too. That'll serve you well in life." Those words meant more to me than all the vague praise I got at home. At least someone saw me for who I was, not just as Tommy's sister. Speaking of Tommy, he was thriving under Mom's attention. By the time he was 7, he'd already won a few local singing competitions. Mom would come home, waving his trophies and certificates, her face glowing with pride. "Did you see Tommy on TV last night?" she'd ask me, not waiting for an answer. The judges said he was the most talented child they'd seen in years. I'd nod and smile, trying to be happy for my brother. But I couldn't help the twinge of jealousy when I saw how differently we were treated. Tommy had the latest toys and gadgets, while I had to save up my allowance for months to buy anything I wanted. As I entered high school, the divide between Tommy and me grew even wider. While I attended the local public school, Mom enrolled Tommy in an expensive private academy known for its music program. Every morning, she'd drop him off in our beat-up minivan, fussing over his uniform and reminding him about his after-school voice lessons. Meanwhile, I'd be halfway to school already, having caught the early bus. One day, after a particularly grueling day of classes and a shift at Grandma's store, I came home to find Mom and Tommy sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by brochures and flyers. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my backpack by the door. Mom looked up, her eyes shining with excitement. "Oh, Kim, you won't believe it. Tommy's been invited to audition for the National Youth Choir. The audition's in New York. We'll need to buy new clothes, book flights, a hotel." I couldn't help but ask, "Can we afford all that?" Mom's smile faltered for a moment. "We'll manage. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Tommy. We can't let it pass by." I nodded, knowing better than to argue. But as I headed up to my room, I couldn't help but wonder, what about my opportunities? It wasn't that I was jealous of Tommy's talent. I was proud of him, in a way. But I was tired of being an afterthought in my own family. That night, I heard Mom and Dad arguing in their bedroom. Their voices were muffled, but I could make out enough to know it was about money. "We're already in debt, Linda," Dad was saying. "We can't keep spending like this." "But this could be Tommy's big break," Mom insisted. "Don't you want him to succeed?" "Of course I do," Dad sighed. "But what about Kim? We haven't put aside anything for her college fund." There was a pause, and then Mom's voice, softer now, "Kim's smart. She'll get scholarships. Besides, she's always been independent. She'll figure something out." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, their words echoing in my head. She'll figure something out. That's what it always came down to, didn't it? I was expected to fend for myself while they poured everything into Tommy's future. The next day, I went to work at Grandma's store. As I was restocking shelves, Grandma called me over to the counter. "Kimberly," she said, her voice gentle. Is everything all right? You seem distracted today. I hesitated for a moment, then the whole story came spilling out: Tommy's audition, the money problems, my fears about college. Grandma listened patiently, her face growing more concerned with each word. When I finished, she shook her head. Listen, I've been thinking. You're a hard worker, Kimberly. How would you like to start earning a real wage here at the store? Not just pocket money, but something you could save for your future. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen and appreciated. As I hugged my grandmother, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could create my own opportunities. I didn't need to wait for someone else to invest in my future. With Grandma's help, I could start investing in myself. As the years went by, I threw myself into my studies and my work at Grandma's store. By the time I was 15, I'd managed to save up a decent amount. My goal? A laptop for school. One Friday afternoon, I decided to count my savings. I went to my closet and pulled out the pink ceramic piggy bank Grandma had given me years ago. But when I shook it, something felt off. The familiar jingle of coins was missing. My heart racing, I opened the bottom and turned it over. Nothing, not a single coin fell out. With shaking hands, I made my way downstairs. Tommy was sprawled on the couch, playing video games on a shiny new console. Hey, Tommy, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You haven't seen my piggy bank, have you? Or the money inside it? He barely glanced up from his game. Nope, sorry. I took a deep breath and headed to the kitchen, where Mom was preparing dinner. Mom, I began, did you take the money from my piggy bank? She turned to me, her face calm. Oh, that. Yes, I did. Tommy needed a new game console. His old one broke, and he was so upset. I knew you had some savings, so I took it. I stood there, speechless. Tears were threatening to spill, but I refused to let them fall. When will you pay me back? I managed to ask. Mom sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. We'll see. Times are tight right now, with all of Tommy's expenses. You understand, don't you? This is an investment in his future. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. Without another word, I turned and ran out of the house. I kept running until I reached Grandma's store, tears blurring my vision. Grandma took one look at me and flipped the open sign to closed. She led me to the back room and sat me down. What happened, Kimberly? She asked gently. Between sobs, I told her everything. As I spoke, I watched Grandma's face change from concern to disbelief to anger. What am I going to do, Grandma? I asked, feeling more lost than ever. I can't trust them. Grandma was quiet for a moment, then she stood up. Wait here, she said. She disappeared into the front of the store. When she came back, she was carrying a laptop box. I was saving this for your birthday, she said, placing the box in my lap. But I think you need it now. Just don't take this home. Keep it here at the store. Use it after your shifts or on weekends. I don't want your mother getting her hands on this too. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. I would work harder, save more, and find a way out of this house where I felt like a stranger. My 16th birthday rolled around with little fanfare. Mom remembered the date this time, at least. She and Dad wished me a happy birthday over breakfast, Dad sliding a card across the table before rushing off to work. I invited a few close friends. We set up some folding tables in the backyard, strung up some lights, and had a pretty good time. I'd saved up from my job at Grandma's store to buy snacks and drinks. My best friend Rachel helped me decorate with some balloons and streamers we got from the dollar store. As we sat around, eating chips and laughing about school drama, I caught myself feeling genuinely happy. For a moment, I could forget about the family dynamics and just be a normal teenager celebrating her birthday. But reality has a way of creeping back in. When Tommy's 16th birthday came around 2 years later, it was an extravaganza. They rented out the fanciest restaurant in town, invited what seemed like half the city, and even hired a professional photographer. The cherry on top? A shiny new car parked outside with a big red bow. I stood off to the side during the party, watching Tommy beam as he accepted congratulations and gifts. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to resent him. This wasn't his fault. He was just living the life our parents, especially Mom, had orchestrated for him. A few months later, I was thrilled to learn I'd been accepted to study economics at a college in the next state. Even better, I'd earned a partial scholarship. But as I soon discovered, partial was the operative word. The scholarship wouldn't cover all my expenses. With trepidation, I approached my parents one evening. "Mom, Dad," I began. "I got into State University for economics. I have a scholarship, but I'll need some help with the rest of the tuition and living expenses." Dad looked up from his newspaper, a crease between his brows. "That's great news about the scholarship, Kim. But you know money's tight right now. With Tommy's music school fees." Mom jumped in. "Kimberly, you're a smart girl. I'm sure you can figure something out. Maybe get a job? You've always been so independent." Defeated, I retreated to my room. As I sat on my bed, staring at the acceptance letter, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Grandma, asking how the conversation with my parents went. I called her back, my voice shaking as I recounted what had happened. Grandma listened quietly, then said, "Kimberly, don't you worry. We'll figure this out together." True to her word, Grandma set up a college fund for me. Between that, my scholarship, and a part-time job I picked up at a cafe near campus, I managed to make it work. "You're going to do great things, Kimberly," Grandma said. "I'm so proud of you." Those words carried me through the tough times in college. When I was up late studying, or pulling double shifts at the cafe, I'd remember Grandma's faith in me and push through. I called Tommy occasionally, trying to keep our connection alive. He was at a prestigious music college, all expenses paid by our parents, of course. Despite the differences in our situations, it was nice to hear his voice, to know that at least one person in that house might be missing me. After 4 grueling years of balancing studies, work, and tight budgets, I finally graduated with my degree in economics. Armed with my hard-earned qualifications and a determination to succeed, I returned to my hometown. It wasn't long before I landed a job at a prestigious financial firm and found a small but comfortable apartment to rent. Life settled into a pleasant routine. Work was challenging but rewarding, and in my free time I started to build a life for myself outside of my family's shadow. I made new friends, took up hiking on weekends, and even started dating a bit. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my mother standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. She stepped inside, wringing her hands. "Kimberly, I need your help." Those words sent a chill down my spine. In all my years, I couldn't remember my mother ever asking for my help. "What's wrong?" I asked, leading her to the couch. She sat down heavily, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sick, Kim, really sick. The doctors, they say I need treatment, but our insurance won't cover it all." My heart dropped. Despite everything, she was still my mother. "How much do you need?" $15,000, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's a lot, but I didn't know where else to turn. "Your father and we've spent everything on Tommy's education. We thought it would pay off by now, but..." The next morning, we drove to the bank in silence. As we waited in line, Mom started talking, her voice low. "You know, Tommy's doing so well," she said. "He's got offers from several big music groups. Once he signs, we'll be able to pay you back in no time." I nodded, only half listening. My mind was racing, thinking about how I'd manage the loan repayments on top of my rent and other expenses. After signing what felt like a mountain of paperwork, I transferred the $15,000 to my mother's account. As we left the bank, she hugged me tightly. A few days later, I was scrolling through my social media feed during my lunch break when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was Tommy, my brother, posting selfies from the Swiss Alps. Confused, I quickly sent him a message. "Hey Tommy, aren't you supposed to be in school? What are you doing in Switzerland?" His reply came quickly, "Oh, hey Kim. Yeah, Mom surprised me with this trip. Said I was having a creative block and needed to recharge. It's amazing here. I'm staying for 2 months." I stared at my phone, my mind refusing to process what I was reading. 2 months in Switzerland? Creative block? Then it hit me. The $15,000 loan. It wasn't for medical treatment, it was for Tommy's vacation. With shaking hands, I called my mother. "Kimberly, what is it now?" Her voice was irritated, as if I was interrupting something important. I took a deep breath. "Mom, we need to talk about the loan. About Tommy's trip. How could you lie to me like that?" There was a pause, then she sighed. "Now, listen here. Your brother is a creative person. He needs constant inspiration and pampering to open up creatively. This trip was essential for his career. He's going to be famous, and we all need to support him." "Support him?" I echoed, my voice rising. "By taking out loans we can't afford? By lying to your other child?" "Oh, don't be such a miser," she scoffed. "You should be happy to support your brother." That was the last straw. "Mom, I want the money back. All of it. Now." Her laugh was cold. "Don't be ridiculous, Kimberly. The money's spent. Besides, you're doing well enough. You don't need it." "If you don't pay me back," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "I'll sue you." There was a moment of stunned silence, then she exploded. "Sue me? Your own mother? You're a terrible daughter. I can't believe I raised such a selfish, heartless child." "This is your last chance, Mom," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Pay me back, or I'm going to court." "Go ahead," she spat. "See if I care. You're dead to me, Kimberly. Dead." The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, shaking with a mix of anger and shock. I'd known this conversation wouldn't go well, but I never imagined it would end like this. In a daze, I called the one person I knew I could always count on, Grandma. I broke down, sobbing as I recounted everything that had happened. Grandma listened patiently, making soothing noises as I poured out my heart. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Grandma spoke, her voice firm. "Kimberly, listen to me. What your mother did was wrong. If you decide to go through with this, I'll support you. I know a good lawyer, my friend's son. He might be willing to take on your case for a reduced fee." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal consultations, paperwork, and sleepless nights. True to her word, Grandma covered the legal fees and introduced me to her friend's son, a sharp young lawyer named Michael. "It's an open and shut case," Michael assured me after our first meeting. "We have the bank records, the text messages. Your mother doesn't have a leg to stand on." The day of the trial arrived. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw my mother for the first time in months. She sat on the other side, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't even look at me. The proceedings seemed to pass in a blur. Michael presented our case clearly and concisely, showing the judge the evidence of my mother's deception. When it was her turn to speak, my mother spun a tale of a desperate need for a family medical emergency, but her story quickly fell apart under questioning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge made his ruling. In the matter of Kimberly Johnson versus Linda Johnson, he began, "I find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to repay the full amount of $15,000, plus interest and court costs." A few days later, I received notice that my mother had taken out a loan to repay me. The money was back in my account, but it felt hollow somehow. I'd won the case, but I'd lost my family in the process. The dust had barely settled from the court case when the real storm hit. It started with a notification on my phone. A friend had tagged me in a post. Curious, I opened it, only to feel my stomach drop. There, on my mother's social media page, was a long, heart-wrenching post about how her own daughter had cruelly taken her to court. She painted herself as a loving, sacrificial mother who had given everything for her children, only to be betrayed in her time of need. My phone buzzed constantly over the next few days as more relatives reached out, not to hear my side, but to berate me for my actions. "I raised you better than this," my aunt scolded. "You brought shame to this entire family," a cousin messaged. "Don't bother coming to the next family reunion," an uncle warned. In the midst of this storm, there was one unwavering source of support: Grandma. She called me every day, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. "Don't you pay any mind to those fools," she'd say firmly. "They don't know the half of what's been going on in that house all these years." A week after my mother's posts went viral, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years, my father's. "I'd been seeing your mother's posts," he began, and I braced myself for the criticism. But then he surprised me. "I want to hear your side of the story. The full story." So I told him everything. The years of feeling overlooked, the incident with my piggy bank, the struggles through college, and finally, the loan and the betrayal that led to the lawsuit. There was a long silence when I finished. Then, to my shock, my father's voice came back thick with emotion. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "Kimberly, I'm so sorry. I failed you as a father. I followed your mother's lead for too long. I told myself I was providing for the family by working long hours, but the truth is, I was running away from the problems at home. I should have been there for you." Tears were streaming down my face now. This was the most open, honest conversation I'd had with my father in, well, ever. "I've got a lot to make up for," he said. "I know that. But if you're willing, I'd like to try to be the father I should have been all along." As we continued to talk, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a parent in my corner. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a start. After our heart-to-heart, Dad decided to take a closer look at the family finances, something he admitted he should have done years ago. He had found that Mom had been secretly withdrawing money from their joint account for years, funneling it all into Tommy's career. But that wasn't the worst of it. She'd taken out multiple loans in both their names, all to fund Tommy's pursuits. They were drowning in debt, and Dad had been completely in the dark. The confrontation that followed was explosive. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from the neighbors. There was shouting, the sound of dishes shattering, and finally, the arrival of police cars. In the aftermath, Dad filed for divorce. The proceedings were messy, but in the end, Mom got half of everything, which went straight to paying off her mountain of debt. I maintained my distance from Mom, focusing on rebuilding my relationship with Dad and cherishing the unwavering support of Grandma. Life started to feel normal. Then, about a year after the divorce, Mom's triumphant posts started appearing on social media again. Tommy had graduated from his music college and landed a spot in a famous band. Her captions were full of "I told you so's" and thinly veiled jabs at Dad and me. "Some people couldn't see the potential," she wrote. "But a mother always knows." Who's laughing now? I tried not to let it get to me. I was doing well at work, had just made a down payment on my own apartment, and was finally feeling like I was on solid ground. Dad was doing better too, seeming happier and more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. 2 years after Tommy's big break, he took another trip to Switzerland. His social media was full of glamorous shots of the Alps, videos of him partying with his bandmates. Then, one chilly morning, he decided to film himself singing at the top of a mountain, wanting to impress his fans with his vocal range in the thin, cold air. It was a disaster. He caught a severe cold that developed into a serious throat infection. Despite the best medical care, the damage was done. Tommy lost his singing voice. The news hit Mom hard. Her neighbors later told me that they heard screaming coming from her house, sounds of things being thrown and broken. When they went to check on her, they found her in a state of total hysteria. She didn't recognize anyone, kept babbling about lost fortunes and ruined dreams. They had no choice but to call for help. Mom was admitted to a mental health facility. The doctors diagnosed her with a severe nervous breakdown, exacerbated by years of stress. As for Tommy, he spiraled into depression and turned to alcohol. For months, we weren't sure if he'd pull through. But slowly, with support from Dad and me, he started to turn things around. He got sober and, in a twist that surprised us all, applied to college to become a music teacher. "I can't sing anymore," he told me over coffee one day. "But maybe I can help other kids who love music. Do it right, you know? Without all the pressure and crazy expectations." I felt a surge of pride for my little brother. "I think that's a great idea, Tommy." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the tumultuous journey of the past few years. I thought about Mom, still in the facility, trapped in a world of her own making. About Dad, finally free to live his own life. About Tommy, finding a new path. And about myself. I'd stood my ground, fought for what was right, and come out stronger on the other side. My name's Judy, I'm an architect by trade, and for years, that's all I cared about. Big buildings, fancy complexes, you name it, I designed it. And let me tell you, the money was good. Real good. I was all about my career, you know? Climbing that ladder, making a name for myself. And I did it, too. By the time I hit my mid-30s, I was at the top of my game. But something was missing. One day, I'm sitting in my fancy office, looking out over the city skyline I helped shape, and it hit me. I wanted a family, kids, a husband, the whole shebang. So there I was, 35 years old, and suddenly on the hunt for Mr. Right. And wouldn't you know it, I found him. We got married pretty quick. Tom, he was different from the guys I usually went for. He wasn't all about the money or the status. He was just real. One night, we're sitting on our tiny apartment balcony, sharing a bottle of cheap wine, when Tom turns to me and says, "Hey, Jude." Yeah, he called me that, like the Beatles song, "Why don't you design us a house? Your dream house. We'll get some builders, make it happen." Design our own house? It was like he'd read my mind. I'd spent years designing other people's dreams, but never my own. I was all over that idea like white on rice. So I got to work. Sketches, plans, 3D models, the works. We built that house, and it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Open plan living area, huge windows to let in all that natural light, a kitchen that would make a celebrity chef jealous. It was us, in brick and mortar form. I was so proud of that house, I sent some photos to this fancy design magazine. Next thing I know, they're calling it the house of the year. Can you believe that? My house, our house, the best of the year. Life was good, you know? We had our dream house, our careers were going great. But something was still missing. We wanted a kid. We tried everything, tracking my cycle, special diets, you name it. Nothing. So we started with the doctors. Tests, and even more tests. But they all said the same thing, we were fine. We talked about other options. Adoption, IVF, all that stuff. But it didn't feel right for us. We decided if it happened, it happened. If not, well, we had each other, right? So we tried to move on. Focused on our careers, on each other. We traveled, we entertained, we lived. Little did I know, life was about to throw us another curveball. One that would change everything. It started with Tom feeling a bit off. Nothing major, just tired all the time, no appetite. We figured it was stress from work or something. But it didn't go away. We finally went to the doctor. I remember sitting in that sterile white room, holding Tom's hand as the doc came in. The look on his face. I knew it wasn't good news. Stomach cancer. Advanced. Those words hit like a freight train. From that moment on, our lives became a whirlwind of hospitals, doctors, and treatments. I threw myself into it, researching every possible cure, every experimental treatment. We traveled to the best clinics, spent a fortune on medicines. But cancer, it's a sneaky bastard. No matter what we tried, Tom just kept getting worse. I watched the man I loved, this strong, vibrant guy, waste away before my eyes. It was like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The end came faster than we expected. One minute he was there, squeezing my hand, telling me it would be okay. The next, he was gone. I was lost. Completely and utterly lost. The house that we'd built together, our dream home, it felt empty now. I tried to keep it together, I really did. But I was falling apart. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Work became impossible. I'd stare at blueprints for hours and not see a thing. My colleagues were worried, I could tell. But what could they do? What could anyone do? About a month after the funeral, I started feeling sick. Really sick. Couldn't keep anything down, not even water. At first, I thought it was just stress, you know? Grief does weird things to your body. But then this crazy thought hit me. What if I had cancer too? I know it sounds nuts. I mean, logically, I knew stomach cancer wasn't contagious. But grief isn't logical, is it? I panicked. Drove myself to the ER in the middle of the night, convinced I was dying. The doctors there, bless 'em, they were patient with me. Ran a bunch of tests to calm me down. And then the doc came in with the results. I braced myself for the worst. But instead, she smiled at me. "Congratulations," she said. "You're pregnant." Pregnant. After all those years of trying, after losing Tom, after everything. I was pregnant. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did both. Right there in the ER, surrounded by beeping machines and worried nurses, I laughed and cried like a crazy person. As I drove home that night, my hand on my still flat stomach, I made a promise. To myself, to Tom, to this little life growing inside me. I was going to be the best damn mom I could be. The pregnancy hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I'd heard stories about morning sickness and all that, but this? This was something else entirely. I could barely drag myself out of bed most days, let alone work on complex architectural projects. My boss, Jake, he tried to be understanding at first. "Take it easy, Judy," he'd say. "We've got you covered." But as the weeks dragged on and I kept missing deadlines, I could see the frustration in his eyes. One day, he called me into his office. I knew what was coming. "Judy," he said, leaning back in his chair, "we can't keep giving you the big projects if you can't deliver. I'm thinking we should move you to remote work, maybe scale back your responsibilities." I threw myself a pity party that night. Sat on the couch Tom and I had picked out together, eating ice cream straight from the tub and crying my eyes out. But then, I felt it. This tiny flutter in my belly. And just like that, I knew. This child, this little miracle growing inside me, was more important than any building I could ever design. More important than any career. The next day, I started looking for a new job. Something closer to home, something that wouldn't stress me out so much. I found a small construction company, just a few blocks from my house. The pay was, well, let's just say it was a far cry from what I was used to. But they were willing to work with my schedule, to be flexible with doctor's appointments and all that. I took the job, and you know what? It was the best decision I could have made. The months flew by. When the big day finally came, I swear I could feel Tom there with me. Cheering me on, telling me I could do this. And I did. After what felt like a lifetime of pain and pushing, their perfect little human was. As I held him for the first time, this wave of love washed over me. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. Stronger than anything. In that moment, I knew I'd do anything for this little guy. Anything at all. I named him Thomas, after his dad. Tommy for short. And as I looked down at his sleeping face, I made another promise. I was going to give this kid the best life I possibly could. No matter what it took. The years flew by like pages in a flipbook. Before I knew it, Tommy was starting school, then middle school, then high school. And let me tell you, that kid was something else. Smart as a whip and athletic to boot. He'd come home with straight A's and trophies from track meets, grinning from ear to ear. "Look, Mom," he'd say, waving his report card or medal. "I did it." And every time, my heart would swell with pride. We didn't have much, but we had enough. A roof over our heads, food on the table, and each other. What more did we need? I made sure to be home when Tommy got back from school, to help with homework, to cheer him on at his meets. No late nights at the office for me, no sir. Tommy was my priority now. High school graduation came and went in a blink. Tommy, cap on his head and diploma in hand, beaming at me from the stage. I cried like a baby, of course. Couldn't help it. My little boy was all grown up. Then came college. Tommy got into a great school in another city. I was so proud of him, but man, it was hard to let him go. The house felt emptier than ever without him around. But you know what? It also gave me a chance to focus on myself again. I threw myself back into work, took on bigger projects. The money started flowing in again, and it felt good. I could help Tommy with his tuition, send him some extra cash for books and stuff. Every weekend, I'd hop in the car and drive to see him. We'd grab lunch, catch a movie, just hang out. It was different, sure, but it was still us. Still good. After graduation, Tommy decided to stay in the city. Got himself a good job and everything. I was happy for him, really I was. But a part of me missed having him close by. A few years went by like that. Me working hard, Tommy building his life in the city. Then one day, he called me up, sounding all excited. "Mom, I've met someone," he said. "Her name's Sarah. She's amazing, Mom. I think she might be the one." I was thrilled for him, of course. All I ever wanted was for Tommy to be happy. And from what he told me, this Sarah sounded perfect. Smart, beautiful, from a good family. Tommy was head over heels. But then things started to change. Tommy called me up one day, out of the blue. "Hey, Mom," he said, sounding a bit sheepish. "I was wondering, could you maybe help me out with buying a car? And, maybe send a bit more money each month? I want to take Sarah out, buy her nice things, you know?" I felt my heart sink a little. This wasn't like Tommy at all. He'd always been so responsible with money. "Honey," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle, "you know I'd do anything for you. But a car? And extra money for gifts? That's a lot to ask. You've got a good job. Why can't you save up for these things yourself?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Tommy spoke again, his voice was cold. "I thought you'd understand," he said. "I thought you'd want me to be happy. But I guess I was wrong." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd just been slapped. After that, things were different. Tommy didn't call as often. When he did, our conversations were short, stilted. It felt like there was this wall between us now, all because I wouldn't buy him a car or fund his lavish dates. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase. That Tommy would come around, realize that love wasn't about fancy cars or expensive gifts. But as the weeks turned into months, and the phone calls got fewer and farther between, I couldn't help but worry. A year passed in a blink. Then one day, out of the blue, Tommy showed up on my doorstep. He wasn't alone. "Mom," he said, grinning from ear to ear, "I want you to meet Sarah. We're getting married." Sarah was everything Tommy had described, pretty, polite, the works. But there was something off. The way she looked at me, it was like I was some quaint little curiosity. Still, I plastered on a smile and welcomed them in. "Oh, what a lovely home," Sarah exclaimed, her eyes roving over every inch of the place. "It's so charming and comfortable." They stayed for dinner, chattering about wedding plans. Sarah's parents were footing the bill, apparently. As they talked, I couldn't help but notice how different Tommy seemed. Gone was my down-to-earth boy. In his place was this stranger, all flash and no substance. The wedding was, well, it was something else. More like a coronation than a marriage ceremony. I felt like a fish out of water, surrounded by all these fancy folks in their designer duds. Tommy barely had time to say hello, too busy schmoozing with Sarah's family and friends. After that, I threw myself into work. Took on big projects, worked longer hours. The money started piling up, and I had this crazy idea. I'd design a house for Tommy and Sarah, build it from the ground up. A wedding gift, you know? But something held me back. I decided to wait, see how things played out. Months went by. Then one day, Tommy and Sarah showed up again. "Mom," Tommy said, "we've been thinking. This house is too big for you alone. Why don't we move in? Keep you company?" I was over the moon. I helped them move in, rearranged things to make room. It felt good, having life in the house again. But that feeling didn't last long. A month in, and Sarah started throwing her weight around. Ordering me around in my own kitchen, demanding fancy meals and expensive wines. "Look," I said one day, trying to keep my cool, "this is still my house. I appreciate you being here, but..." Sarah cut me off with a shriek. "Tommy, did you hear how she spoke to me?" And to my shock, Tommy yelled at me. At me, his own mother. After that, things got real cold. They barely spoke to me, like I was some kind of ghost haunting my own home. Then one night, I overheard them talking. "We need to get rid of her," Sarah was saying. "This house is wasted on her." "Yeah," Tommy replied, and my heart nearly stopped. Mom's had her time. Maybe we should look into nursing homes. I couldn't believe my ears. My own son, plotting to throw me out of my home? The home I'd designed, that I'd raised him in? I stepped around the corner, fury boiling in my veins. "How dare you," I spat. Tommy looked shocked, then guilty. But one glance at Sarah, and his face hardened. "Mom," he said, his voice cold, "I think it's time for you to leave." That was it, the last straw. "Leave?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh no, sweetheart. This is my house, my name on the deed. If anyone's leaving, it's you too." Tommy's face went red. "But Mom..." "No buts," I cut him off. "Pack your bags. Both of you." They tried to argue, but I stood firm. This was my house, damn it. As I watched them drive away, bags piled in the back of their fancy car, I felt empty. How had it come to this? Where had I gone wrong? The calm after the storm didn't last long. My phone started ringing off the hook, Tommy's name flashing on the screen every time. At first, I ignored it, but eventually, I picked up. "Mom," Tommy's voice was cold, calculated. "We need to talk about the house. It's half mine, by law. Dad left it to me too." I felt my blood pressure rising. "That's not true, Tommy. Your father left everything to me." "Well, I'm challenging that. I want half the value of the house. It's my right as Dad's son." He hung up on me, just like that. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like the world was spinning out of control. I'd been planning to build them a house, for crying out loud. A wedding gift, a fresh start. But now I didn't want to give them a damn thing. I called up Jack, Tom's old friend from law school. Explained the situation, my voice shaking. Judy, Jack said, his voice calm and reassuring. You're in the clear legally. Tom's will left everything to you. No contest. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But Jack wasn't done. However, he continued, if Tommy decides to sue, well, it could get messy, expensive, and drawn out. I spent the next few weeks in a daze. I kept hoping Tommy would come to his senses, that his conscience would kick in. But the phone calls kept coming, each one more demanding than the last. Then, one morning, I woke up to a commotion outside. I peeked out the window and felt my heart stop. There, on my front lawn, was a giant "for sale" sign. I ran outside in my robe, not caring what the neighbors thought. And boy, were they curious. Judy, you selling the place? Mrs. Peterson from next door called out. Moving to be closer to your son? Mr. Johnson asked, pausing his morning jog. I stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. What could I say? That my son was trying to force me out of my own home? I tried calling Tommy, my fingers shaking as I dialed. Straight to voicemail. With a grunt of frustration, I yanked the sign out of the ground. It came up easier than I expected, nearly sending me tumbling backward. I dragged it into the garage, out of sight. Back in the house, I sank onto the couch, the same one where Tom and I used to sit, where I'd nursed Tommy as a baby. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't cry. I was Judy goddamn Miller. I'd designed skyscrapers, for Pete's sake. I'd raised a child on my own. I'd faced worse than this. I was trying to relax that evening, curled up on the couch with a book I couldn't focus on, when I heard the front door open. My heart leapt. Was it Tommy, coming to his senses? But the voices I heard weren't just Tommy's. There were strangers in my house. I got up, my legs shaky, and made my way to the foyer. And there they were, Tommy, Sarah, and a couple I'd never seen before, all standing in my entryway like they owned the place. And this is the living room, Tommy was saying, gesturing grandly. Original hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows. The couple was nodding, looking impressed. It's stunning, the woman said. We'll take it. When can we move in? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Excuse me, I said, my voice quavering. This house is not for sale. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave. Tommy's face twisted into something ugly. He turned to the couple and said, loudly, don't mind her. She's not well. Dementia, you know. Sad, really. I felt like I'd been slapped. Tommy, I gasped. How dare you? But he talked over me, continuing his tour like I wasn't even there. My hands shaking, I grabbed my phone. I'm calling the police, I announced. All of you, out. Now. The couple looked uncertain, glancing between me and Tommy. Finally, they mumbled some excuses and headed for the door. As they left, Sarah turned to me, her eyes cold. You'll regret this, she hissed. You'll never see Tommy again, or your grandchild. That's when I noticed it, the slight swell of her belly under her designer blouse. My grandchild. I was going to be a grandmother. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I barely noticed them leaving, the door slamming behind them. The next few months were a blur of courtrooms and sleepless nights. Tommy and Sarah, bankrolled by her parents, hired a team of slick lawyers. They threw everything they had at me, claims of mental incompetence, accusations of abuse against Tommy, you name it. I was exhausted. Bone deep, soul-crushing exhausted. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Eventually, I had to quit my job, I just couldn't keep up anymore. One afternoon, as I was bringing in the mail, more legal documents, of course, my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, came over. Judy, she said, her kind face creased with concern. Have you thought about going public with this? You know, telling your story on TV? Sometimes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. I brushed her off, it felt wrong, somehow, to air our dirty laundry in public. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Listen, you old fool, Tommy's voice crackled over the line. Just give up already. You're embarrassing yourself. Something in me snapped. The next day, I called the local news station. It was time to tell my story. The TV interview aired, and for a few days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, old friends, even a few lawyers offering their services. I ignored them all. I was tired, so tired. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, ready for another reporter, but instead found myself face to face with Sarah's parents. My heart sank. This was it, I thought. They're here to finish what Tommy and Sarah started. But to my shock, they looked ashamed. Judy, Sarah's mother said, her voice barely above a whisper, we had no idea. We're so sorry. They came in, and over coffee, the whole story came out. They'd seen the TV interview, learned for the first time what their daughter and Tommy had been up to. The lawsuit, the attempts to sell my house, all of it. We spoiled Sarah, her father admitted, shaking his head. And now, well, she's always asking for money. They told me how they'd bought Tommy and Sarah an apartment. But Sarah had demanded a house instead. She said she'd handle it herself, her mother said, dabbing at her eyes. We had no idea this is what she meant. I sat there, stunned. I was going to build them a house, I said, my voice cracking. As a wedding gift. But after all this, I just can't. Sarah's parents nodded, understanding in their eyes. We're cutting them off, her father said firmly. No more money. Not for lawyers, not for anything. True to their word, they did just that. Without the financial backing, Tommy and Sarah's case fell apart. The lawsuit was dismissed, and just like that, it was over. Months passed. I heard through the grapevine that Sarah had given birth to a little girl. The thought made my heart ache. More time went by. I threw myself back into work, trying to rebuild the life that had been put on hold. Then one day, out of the blue, there was a tap on the door. It was Tommy. The moment I opened, he burst into tears. I'm so sorry, he sobbed. I was selfish and stupid, and... God, Mom, I had no idea how hard it was to be a parent. What you went through, raising me alone. I stood there, watching my son cry, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said finally. What you did, it's going to take time to get past that. But, I'd like to meet my granddaughter. We worked out an arrangement. I'd babysit sometimes, buy clothes and toys for the baby. It was a start. The first time I held little Emma, I felt my heart melt. She had Tommy's eyes, my nose. She was perfect. Over time, things, well, they didn't go back to normal. I don't think they ever could. But they got better. Sarah became less demanding, even thanked me once for my help. Tommy, he was trying. Really trying. Do I forgive him? I don't know. Some days, when I'm playing with Emma, seeing Tommy's smile in hers, I think maybe I can. Other days, when the memory of what he did hits me, it feels impossible. But you know what? I'm not focusing on that right now. I'm just living, day by day. Enjoying my work, my home, my granddaughter. The future? Well, that'll sort itself out in time.